Hi everybody, good morning. Today's video I am going to be reading chapter 8. So let's get started. Okay, starting now. Okay, just getting comfortable. Okay. Molly's in the hospital again, and it's my fault. Why can't I learn when to keep my mouth shut? I'd already said something I regretted to Ben, and I hadn't had the nerve to go to him and apologize. It was just a week later that I blew it with Molly. She was lying on her bed in her nightgown, even though it was 11 in the morning. She's gotten so darn lazy, and my parents don't even say anything to her about it. That's partly why I was mad at her to begin with, because because she was still in her nightgown at 11 in the morning. She was grouchy and mad too. I'm not sure why. I think mostly it was because school had just ended before she'd even had a chance to go back. Tierney McGoldrick hardly ever calls her anymore. She doesn't know it. She doesn't know it, but toward the end of school, he started dating a red-haired senior girl. At least I was smart enough to not to tell Molly that. But there she was, lying on her bed, grumbling about how awful she looks. I'm so sick of hearing Molly. My favorite YouTuber posted. Yay. Okay. But there she was, lying on her bed, grumbling about everything. I'm so sick of hearing Molly talk about how she looks. Her face is too fat. Her hair is too thin. To hear her talk, you'd think she was really a mess. When the truth is that she's still a billion times prettier than I am, which is why I'm sick of listening to her. I told her to shut up. She told me to drop dead, and before I dropped dead to pick up my sneakers from her side of the room, I told her to pick them up herself. She started to get up, I think pick up my sneakers and throw them at me. And when she swung her legs over the side of the bed, I suddenly saw what they looked like. Molly, I said, forgetting about my sneakers. What's wrong with your legs? What do you mean, what's wrong with my legs? No one had ever criticized Molly's legs before. In fact, even I have to admit that Molly's got nice legs. She held up her nightgown and looked down. Both of her legs were covered with dark red spots. It looked like a lot of mosquito bites, except that they weren't swollen. Does it hurt? No, she said slowly, looking puzzled. What could it be? It wasn't there yesterday. I know it wasn't. Well, it's there now, and it sure looks weird. She pulled her nightgown down to cover her legs. Then she got into bed and pulled the covers up around her. Don't tell anyone, she said. I will too. I'm telling Mom. I started out of the room. Don't you dare, Molly ordered. I'll be darned if I'll take orders from Molly. Anyway, I really thought my parents ought to know. I went downstairs and told Mom that there was something wrong with Molly's legs. She jumped up with a frightened look and went upstairs. I stayed out of it after that, but I listened. I heard Mom and Molly arguing. I heard my mother get my father from the study, then more arguing with Molly. I heard my mother go to the upstairs phone, make a call, and go back to Molly. Then Molly crying, yelling. I had never in my life heard Molly like that before. She was screaming, No, I won't. I won't. Things quieted after a few minutes, and then my father came down. His face was very drawn, very tired. "We have to take Molly back to the hospital," he told me abruptly, and without waiting for me to answer, he went out to start the car. Mom came downstairs with Molly. She was in her bathrobe and slippers, and she was sobbing. When they were by the front door, Molly saw me standing all alone in the living room. She turned to me, still crying, and said, "I hate you. I hate you." "Molly," I whispered, "please don't." They were in the car and ready to leave when I heard my mother call to me. I went outside, letting the screen door bang behind me, and walked over to the car. "Molly wants to tell you something," Mom said. Molly was in the back seat and huddled in the corner, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. "Mag," she said, choking a little because she was trying to stop crying, "tell Ben and Maria not to have the baby until I get home." "Okay," I nodded. "I'll tell them," as if they had any control over it. But I would tell them what Molly said, just because Molly asked me to. At that point, I would have done anything in the world for Molly. I went back upstairs, picked up my sneakers, and put them in the closet. I made Molly's bed. The pussy willows were still there, in their little vase. The photographs of Will were on the back of the wall, and the two of Molly and her flowers are with them now. The chalk mark was still there, faded, but there. It was a nice room, except that an hour before, Molly had been in it. And now she wasn't, and it was my fault. I went down to the darkroom, gathered up the photographs of Maria I'd been working on, and walked across the field to their house. Will Banks was there, having lunch with Ben and Maria. They were all sitting outside of the picnic table, eating the entire crop of peas. Sorry. Okay. And walked across the field to their house. Will Banks was there, having lunch with Ben and Maria. They were all sitting outside at the picnic table, eating the entire crop. Oh, I think about that. Sorry. There was a huge bowl of them in the middle of the table, and they were each eating from it with their own spoons as if it were the most normal sort of lunch in the world. "Hey, Mag," Ben greeted me. "How's it going?" "Have a pea. Have 2 peas." He fed me 2 peas from his spoon. They were the tenderest, sweetest peas I've ever eaten. I sat down on the bench beside Will and said, "Molly's back in the hospital, and she says please don't have the baby until she comes home." I know that's a dumb thing to say. Then I started to cry. Will Banks put his arms around me and rocked me back and forth as if I were a baby. I cried until his shirt collar was wet, clear through, saying, "It's my fault, it's my fault, it's my fault," and over again. Will said nothing except, there. Finally, I stopped crying, sat up straight, blew my nose on the handkerchief Will gave me, and told me what had happened. No one said very much. They told me, of course, that isn't my fault. I knew that already. Ben said, "You know, sometimes it's nice just to have someone to blame. Even if it has to be yourself. Even if it doesn't make sense." We sat there quietly for a minute, and then I asked if I could borrow Maria's spoon. She wiped it on her napkin and gave it to me. and I ate all the peas that were left in the big bowl. Okay, there were pounds of peas, and I ate them all. I have never been so hungry in my life. The three of them watched in amazement while I ate all those peas. When I was finished, Maria started to giggle. Then we all started to laugh and laughed until we were exhausted. It is so good to have friends who understand how there is a time for crying and a time for laughing, and that sometimes the two are very close together. I took out the photographs of Maria. Will had seen them, of course, but because we worked on them together, he is as able in the darkroom now as I am, but our interests are different. He is fascinated by the technical aspects of photography, by the chemicals and the inner workings of cameras. I don't care so much about those things. I care about the expressions on people's faces, the way the light falls onto them, and the way the shadows are in soft patterns and contrast. We looked at the pictures together and talked about them. Ben was much like Will, interested in the problems of exposure and film latitude. Maria was like me. She liked seeing how the shadows curved around the fullness of the baby inside her, how her hands rested on the roundness of her middle, how her eyes were both serene and excited at the same time. Meg, she said, Ben and I were talking about something the other night, and we want you to think it over and talk about it with your parents. If you want to, and if they don't mind, we'd like you to photograph the birth of the baby. I was floored. Golly, I said slowly, I don't know. It never occurred to me. I mean, I don't want to intrude. But they were both shaking their heads. No, Ben said. It wouldn't be an intrusion. We wouldn't want just anyone there, and of course you'd have to be careful to stay out of the way and not to touch anything sterile. But you're special, Mag. You're close to us. Someday Marie and I would like to be able to look back at the moment. We'd like the baby someday to be able to see it too. You're the one who can do it, if you want to. I wanted to desperately. But I had to be honest with them also. I've never seen a baby being born, I said. I don't even know much about it. Neither have we, Maria laughed, but we'll prepare for that part. Ben will show you our books and explain everything in advance so that you'll know exactly what to expect when the time comes. Only Ben, she added to him. I think you'd better do it soon, because I don't know how much longer we have. The calendar says 2 weeks, but there are times when I wonder if it might be sooner. I promised to talk to my parents, and Ben said he would, too. Suddenly, I thought of something. What if it's born at night? I asked. There won't be enough light. I could use a flash, I suppose, but... Ben held up one hand. Don't worry, he said. He cupped his hands into a megaphone and held them against Maria's stomach. Then he spoke to the baby through his hands. Now hear this, kid. You are under instructions to wait until Molly comes home. Then come, but do it in daylight, you hear? That'll do it, Ben said. Maria and I are determined to have an obedient child. Sorry, I got stuck. Okay. Before I left, I took Ben aside and spoke to him alone. I'm sorry, Ben, for what I did I said yesterday, that day. He squeezed, he squeezed, he squeezed my shoulders. That's okay, Meg. We all say things we're sorry for, but do you understand now what I was talking about that day? I shook my head and answered him seriously, honestly. No, I think you're wrong to anticipate bad things. I don't understand why you even want to think about something like that, but I'm still sorry for what I said. Well, Ben said, we're friends anyway. Hang in there, Meg. And he shook my hand. Will walked me home across the field. He was very quiet. Halfway home, he said, Meg, you're very young. Do you think it's a good idea, really being there when the child is born? Why not? It might be very frightening. Birth isn't an easy thing, you know. I know that. I dislodged a small rock with one toe and kicked it through a clump of tall grass. For Pete's sake, Will, how can I learn if I don't take risks? You're the one who taught me that. Will stopped short and thought for a minute. You're absolutely right, Meg. Absolutely right. He looked a little sheepish. I looked around the field. Will, what happened to all those yellow flowers that were here last month? Gone until next June, he told me. They've all been replaced by July's flowers. Molly's goldenrod will be in bloom before long. I liked those yellow ones, I said grumpily. Margaret, are you grieving over Golden Grove on leaving? Will asked. What? I was puzzled. He never called me Margaret before. He never called me Margaret. What was he talking about? He smiled. It's a poem by Hopkins. Your father would know. It is the blind man was born for. It is Margaret you mourn for, he went on. Not me, I told him arrogantly. I never mourn for myself. We all do, Mag, Will said. We all do. That was 3 weeks ago. July is almost over. Molly isn't home yet. The baby hasn't been born. So I suppose it's following Ben's instructions and waiting for her. I've studied the books on delivering babies with Marie and Ben, and I'm ready to do the photographs. My parents don't mind. When I asked them, they said sure, without even discussing it. They're very preoccupied. I know why, finally. It was a few nights ago after supper. My dad was smoking his pipe at the kitchen table. The dishes were done. Mom was sewing on the quilt, which is almost finished. I was just hanging around, talking too much. I was trying to make up for the quiet that had been consuming our house. I even turned the radio on. There was some rock music playing. Hey, Dad, dance with me, I said, pulling at his arm. It was something silly we used to do sometimes. Back in town, my dad is a terrible dancer, but sometimes he used to dance with Molly and me in the kitchen. It used to break my mother up. He finally put it down his pipe and got up and started dancing. Poor Dad, he hadn't gotten any better since the last time we did it. And I think I have. A little, but he's pretty uninhibited. And he tried. It was dark outside. We had eaten late. Mom turned on the light and I could see on the kitchen walls some of the drawings of wildflowers that Molly had been doing. Hold on, let's see. That she had hung here and here. Dad and I danced and danced until he was sweating and laughing. Mom was laughing too. Okay. Mom was laughing too. Then the music changed to a slow piece. Dad breathed a great sigh of relief and said, "Ah, my tempo. May I have the pleasure, my dear?" He held out his arms to me, and I curled up inside them. We walked slowly around the kitchen like people in an old movie until the music ended. We stood facing each other at the end, and I said suddenly, "I wish Mom was here." My mother made a small noise, and when I looked over at her, she was crying. I looked back at Dad in bewilderment, and there were tears on his face too. The first time I had ever seen my father cry. I reached out my arms to him, and we both held out our arms to Mom. She moved into them, and as the music started again, another slow, melancholy song from some past summer. I couldn't remember. The three of us danced together. The wildflowers on the wall moved in a gradual blur through our circling, and through my own tears, I held my arms tight around the two of them as we moved around in a kind of rhythm that kept us close. An enclosure made of ourselves that kept the rest of the world away. As we danced and wept at the same time, I knew when they hadn't wanted to tell me, and they knew that I knew that Molly wouldn't be coming home again, that Molly was going to die. Oh, that's unfortunate. Thanks everyone for watching this video. I'm going to be posting more maybe most likely tomorrow. So I'll see you again in the next video. Bye.